Grace Washington had no idea she was about to lose her job for saving a child's life. As she blew iridescent soap bubbles toward Marcus Rivera's autistic son, 7-year-old Ethan, watching him reach up with trembling fingers toward the floating spheres, Grace thought she was witnessing a miracle. For the first time in 4 years, since his mother's tragic death, Ethan was smiling. Actually smiling. And then he whispered something that made Grace's heart stop. "Beautiful Mama Grace. So beautiful." His first words in 4 years. Grace didn't know Marcus was watching from the marble archway, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. She didn't know he was about to fire her for what he'd call unprofessional interference with medical protocols. And she definitely didn't know that in exactly 27 minutes, Ethan would do something that would force Marcus to question everything he believed about healing family and the black immigrant woman he was about to destroy. Because what happened next would prove that sometimes a housekeeper with no credentials can perform miracles that $3 million in therapy cannot. And Marcus Rivera was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. 6 months earlier, Marcus Rivera sat in his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan, worth $4 billion, and completely powerless to help his son. At 38, Marcus had built Rivera Tech from nothing into one of America's largest AI companies. He could predict market trends, revolutionize entire industries, and command respect from world leaders. But he couldn't reach his own child. 4 years ago, everything changed in one devastating moment. His wife Elena, driving home from Ethan's 3rd birthday party, was killed instantly by a drunk driver. 3-year-old Ethan, who had been a bright, chattering little boy, obsessed with colors and patterns, simply stopped. Stopped talking, stopped laughing, stopped making eye contact. The doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by trauma, complicated by autism spectrum characteristics that Elena's nurturing presence had previously masked. Marcus called it his personal hell. "Mr. Rivera." His assistant Sophia interrupted his brooding. "You have the consultation with Dr. Brennan, Ethan's new neurotherapist, in 20 minutes. Yes, sir." Brennan would be the 19 specialists Marcus had hired. Speech pathologists, behavioral analysts, play therapists, art therapists, equine therapists. If it existed and cost a fortune, Marcus had tried it. Nothing worked. Ethan spent his days arranging toys in precise geometric patterns, staring at light reflections, and living in a world where no one else could reach him. The boy who once babbled excitedly about rainbows and butterflies now moved through their mansion like a beautiful ghost. "Also," Sophia continued, "Mrs. Henderson gave her notice yesterday. She said Ethan's silence was unsettling, and that your care requirements were too demanding." Marcus felt the familiar stab of guilt. He had become obsessed with Ethan's routines. Precise mealtimes, structured therapy schedules, documented behavioral interventions. He monitored every interaction through security cameras and required detailed reports from all staff. But despite his control and endless money, Ethan only seemed to drift further away. "Post another job listing," Marcus said wearily. "Same requirements, experience with special needs, excellent references, complete commitment to protocols." What Marcus didn't know was that the woman who would answer that job posting would turn his carefully controlled world upside down. Grace Washington arrived at the Rivera mansion on a rainy Wednesday morning, carrying a worn leather purse and wearing her best dress for the interview. At 32, she was a proud Jamaican immigrant who had worked as a domestic helper for 7 years since arriving in America. Grace's credentials weren't impressive compared to Marcus's previous housekeepers. No formal special needs training, no work with billionaire families. But what Grace lacked in certificates, she possessed in abundance through experience. She had raised 4 children as a single mother in Kingston, including her youngest Zara, who had developmental challenges. "Ms. Washington," Marcus said as they sat in his study, "I need absolute clarity about this position. My son Ethan has complex needs requiring structured, consistent care. Are you prepared to follow detailed protocols regarding his daily routine?" Grace nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. I understand children with special needs thrive with predictability and patience." "Ethan doesn't speak." Marcus continued, his voice tight with old pain. He hasn't said a word in 4 years. He also avoids eye contact, has specific behavioral patterns, and can become distressed if his routine is disrupted. Can you handle that? I can, sir. I've worked with children who communicate in their own special ways. Sometimes silence speaks loudest when you know how to listen. Marcus was struck by Grace's calm dignity and thoughtful responses. Unlike previous candidates who seemed intimidated or overly sympathetic, Grace spoke about Ethan's needs with genuine understanding. Ms. Washington, I'll be honest, this is an extremely challenging position. 6 housekeepers have quit in the past year because they found Ethan's behavior difficult to manage. Why do you think you'll be different? Grace paused, choosing her words carefully. Mr. Rivera, I believe every child has their own language for connecting with the world. My job isn't to change Ethan or fix him. It's to understand his language and create a space where he feels truly seen and valued. Marcus hired Grace immediately. Grace's first weeks at the Rivera mansion revealed the depth of Ethan's isolation and the rigidity of his world. Ethan's routine was precise as clockwork. Wake at 7:00 a.m., eat plain oatmeal, spend mornings by his bedroom window, arranging colored blocks in complex patterns. Therapy sessions 3 times weekly, solitary lunch, afternoon tutoring, or quiet play. Every moment scheduled, every interaction monitored through security cameras. But Grace noticed things others missed. While Ethan never spoke or made obvious eye contact, he was constantly observing his environment with intense focus. When Grace entered a room, Ethan would subtly shift position to maintain visual contact. When she hummed softly while cleaning, his repetitive hand flapping would become calmer, more rhythmic. When she spoke to him gently while dusting, "Good morning, Ethan. What beautiful patterns you're making today." His stimming behaviors would slow to peaceful, almost musical movements. Ethan was communicating, just not with words. Grace also observed that Ethan's most peaceful moments came during tiny interruptions to his rigid schedule. A bird landing outside his window, rain creating patterns on glass, sunlight casting rainbow prisms through crystal vases. These natural moments captured his attention in ways that expensive therapy tools never could. 3 weeks into Grace's employment, something magical began happening. Ethan started seeking proximity to Grace without prompting. When she cleaned the living room, he would quietly bring his blocks and arrange them nearby. When she prepared meals, he would sit at the kitchen island, playing within sight of her gentle movements. "Ethan," Grace would say softly as she worked, "I see you there with your beautiful blocks. Those patterns remind me of the waves back home in Jamaica. Always moving, always perfect." Ethan never responded verbally, but his stimming would calm, and sometimes he would hold up one of his blocks, as if sharing something precious. Grace began incorporating Ethan's interests into her daily routine. She arranged cleaning supplies in color patterns similar to his blocks. She hummed melodies that matched the rhythm of his movements. She timed her activities so natural light would create the window patterns he loved during his scheduled play periods. These weren't disruptions to Ethan's routine. They were enhancements that honored his unique way of experiencing the world. One afternoon, while Grace folded laundry in the sunroom, Ethan approached with something he had never shared before, a small notebook filled with intricate geometric drawings. "Oh my goodness," Grace whispered, looking at the detailed artwork. "Ethan, these are absolutely beautiful. You see patterns that most people don't even notice." Ethan didn't look directly at her, but he sat down beside the laundry basket and continued drawing while Grace worked. It was the closest physical proximity he had chosen with another person since his mother's death. Grace felt tears sting her eyes as she realized the profound gift Ethan was offering, his trust. The breakthrough came on a golden Thursday afternoon that would change everything. Grace was cleaning the living room windows while Ethan sat nearby with his blocks, mesmerized by sunlight streaming through the clean glass and creating rainbow patterns across the marble floor. Grace had just finished cleaning and was organizing her supplies when she noticed the small bottle of bubble solution in her caddy. She typically used it to check for air leaks around windows, but seeing Ethan's fascination with light patterns sparked an idea. Grace opened the bubble solution and dipped the wand, creating a stream of iridescent bubbles that floated through the sunbeams. The bubbles caught the light and scattered tiny rainbows throughout the room, exactly the kind of visual magic that captivated Ethan's unique perception. For the first time in 4 years, Ethan smiled. Not only did he smile, but he stood up from his blocks and began reaching toward the bubbles with obvious delight. His usual careful, controlled movements became animated and joyful as he tried to catch the floating spheres. His face lit up with an expression Grace had only seen in photographs from before his mother's death. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. Beautiful, Ethan whispered so quietly Grace almost missed it. Grace's hands trembled as she realized what had just happened. Ethan had spoken. After 4 years of silence, he had found a word for something that brought him joy. "Yes, sweetheart," Grace said through tears. "They are beautiful. So beautiful." Ethan reached for another bubble, and this time he looked directly at Grace's face. The first intentional eye contact he had made with another person since his mother's death. That's when Marcus walked in. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus's voice shattered the magical moment like glass exploding. Grace spun around, still holding the bubble wand, and saw Marcus's face contorted with fury and disbelief. Ethan immediately shut down, retreating to his corner and resuming the rocking motion that meant he felt unsafe. Rivera, You were just what, playing games, making a mess, disrupting his carefully structured therapy schedule. Grace tried desperately to explain. "Sir," he was smiling. For just a moment he was, what, cured by soap bubbles? Marcus's voice dripped with sarcasm and rage. "Do you have any idea how much I pay professionals to work with my son, $3 million in therapy, and you think party tricks are going to help?" Grace looked at Ethan, who had completely withdrawn into himself again, and felt her heart breaking. "Sir," he said a word. He said beautiful, and he looked at me. He made eye contact. Marcus laughed harshly. "My son hasn't spoken in 4 years. You're imagining things because you want to feel important to justify your position here. Mr. Rivera, please just observe him for a moment. Look at how he's reacting." "I'm looking at how he's reacting to you disrupting his afternoon routine with unauthorized activities." Marcus's voice echoed through the mansion. "You've shown complete disregard for professional protocols and therapeutic boundaries. You're fired. Pack your things and get out of my house immediately." Grace felt her world crashing down around her. She had finally connected with Ethan, had witnessed his first breakthrough in years, and now she was being dismissed as if her observations meant nothing. "Please, sir, give me a chance to explain." "There's nothing to explain. I want you gone within the hour." Grace looked one more time at Ethan, who was now completely unresponsive, rocking back and forth in his corner. She quietly left the room to pack her few belongings. Her heart shattered, not for herself, but for the little boy who had just lost his bridge back to the world. Marcus stood in the living room, surrounded by floating bubbles that were slowly popping and disappearing, feeling righteous about protecting his son from what he saw as unprofessional interference. But in 27 minutes, Ethan would do something that would force Marcus to question everything he thought he knew about his son's condition and Grace's role in his care. And what Marcus would discover would change the trajectory of all their lives forever. 27 minutes after Grace left the Rivera mansion, Marcus heard something that made his blood freeze and his heart stop beating. "Mama Grace. Mama Grace, come back." The voice was coming from Ethan's room. Ethan's voice screaming words Marcus had never heard his son speak. Marcus ran upstairs, taking the steps 3 at a time, and found Ethan standing at his bedroom window, tears streaming down his face, pounding on the glass with both hands. "Mama Grace," Ethan cried again, his voice breaking with desperation. "Come back. Bring back the beautiful bubbles." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, watching his son, who hadn't spoken in 4 years, begging for the woman Marcus had just fired. "Ethan," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking with shock. "Son, Ethan turned to look at his father with eyes full of pain and accusation. "You made Mama Grace go away," he said clearly, each word cutting through Marcus like a blade. "Bring her back. She makes me feel safe." Marcus felt like the world was spinning around him. His son was speaking in full sentences, making direct eye contact and expressing complex emotions. All things the expensive therapists had said might never happen. And Ethan's first words in 4 years were to call Grace Mama and beg for her return. "Ethan, son, I didn't know you could talk." "I never stopped talking in my head, Daddy," Ethan said simply. "I just stopped talking out loud because it hurt too much after Mama died. But Mama Grace made it feel safe again." Marcus knelt down to Ethan's level, his heart pounding with the reality of what was happening. "Can you tell me about Mama Grace? What did she do that made you feel safe?" Ethan wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "She talks to me like Mama used to, soft and kind. She doesn't try to make me different. The doctor people always want me to look at their eyes and talk when I don't want to. They get frustrated when I can't. But Mama Grace just sits with me. She sees my patterns and thinks they're beautiful." Marcus was stunned. Ethan was not only speaking clearly but expressing sophisticated, emotional concepts about feeling accepted versus pressured to change. "Why didn't you talk to me, son?" Ethan looked at Marcus with heartbreaking honesty. "Because you're always worried and angry. You want to fix me with doctor appointments and schedules, but I'm not broken, Daddy. I'm just different, and I'm still sad about Mama." Marcus felt like he was seeing his son clearly for the first time in 4 years. Ethan wasn't recovering from his autism or his grief. He was learning to live with both while finding people who accepted him exactly as he was. "What made today different? Why did you start talking when Grace was here?" "Because she blew the beautiful bubbles and she was happy with me. She didn't want me to be different. She just wanted to share something beautiful." Marcus realized with devastating clarity that Grace had accomplished in 5 minutes what $3 million worth of therapy hadn't achieved in 4 years. She had met Ethan where he was and celebrated him for who he was, rather than trying to change him. And Marcus had just fired the one person who could reach his son. Marcus immediately called his assistant. "Sophia, I need you to find Grace Washington's contact information, current location, whatever it takes. Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the week." "Sir, is everything all right?" Marcus looked at Ethan, who was sitting quietly, but more present and engaged than Marcus had seen him in years. "My son just spoke his first words in 4 years, and they were asking for the woman I just fired. I need to find her and fix this immediately." Over the next 24 hours, Marcus learned more about Grace Washington than he had bothered to discover during her employment. His private investigator found that Grace had been supporting her elderly mother and disabled sister with her salary. She had been living in a small studio apartment and sending most of her earnings back to Jamaica to help extended family. More importantly, Marcus learned that Grace had a reputation in the domestic worker community as someone who could connect with difficult children, not through force or training, but through patience and intuitive understanding. "Mr. Rivera," the investigator reported, "Grace Washington is currently staying at a women's shelter downtown. She couldn't afford rent after losing her position, and she's been looking for new employment, but word about her sudden dismissal has made it difficult for her to find another job." Marcus felt sick with guilt. Not only had he taken away Ethan's primary source of comfort and connection, but he had destroyed Grace's livelihood based on his own prejudiced assumptions about credentials versus caring. Meanwhile, Ethan was asking for Grace constantly. "When is Mama Grace coming back? Can we make beautiful bubbles when she comes home?" Marcus tried explaining that Grace had to leave, but Ethan's response was devastating. "Did I do something wrong? Is that why you made her go away?" Marcus realized that Ethan was blaming himself for Grace's departure, adding another layer of trauma to his already fragile emotional state. Marcus found Grace at the women's shelter on Friday evening. She was sitting in the common area helping other women's children with homework, demonstrating the same patient-intuitive approach she had used with Ethan. "Grace," Marcus said as he approached her, "I need to talk to you." Grace looked up with a mixture of weariness and dignity. "Mr. Rivera, I'm surprised to see you here." "Grace, I made a terrible mistake. Ethan started talking after you left." Grace's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "He spoke. What did he say?" "He called for Mama Grace. He begged me to bring you back. He told me that you made him feel safe to talk again." Tears filled Grace's eyes. He called me Mama. Grace, I didn't understand what was happening when I saw you with the bubbles. I thought you were being unprofessional, disrupting his routine. But you were giving him exactly what he needed: acceptance, joy, and connection. Marcus sat down across from Grace, his voice heavy with remorse. I've spent 4 years and $3 million trying to fix my son. But you weren't trying to fix him. You were just loving him as he is. Grace wiped her eyes. Mr. Rivera, Ethan doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be understood, accepted, and given space to heal from his grief in his own way. I know that now. Grace, will you please come back? Ethan is heartbroken without you. And I realize now that you weren't just a housekeeper. You were the person who understood my son when I couldn't. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Rivera, if I come back, things need to be different. You need to trust me to connect with Ethan in ways that work for him, even if they don't look like traditional therapy. Anything. I'll do anything to help my son. And you need to understand that Ethan may always be different. He may always see the world in his own unique way. My job isn't to change that. It's to help him thrive as the beautiful, complex person he is. Marcus nodded. I'm beginning to understand that. Will you come home with us? Ethan has been asking for you constantly. When Grace walked into the Rivera mansion, Ethan was sitting by the living room window where he had watched her leave. The moment he saw her, his face lit up with the same joy Marcus had witnessed during the bubble incident. Mama Grace, Ethan called out, running to her with arms outstretched. Grace knelt down and caught Ethan in a hug, both of them crying with relief and happiness. I missed you so much, my beautiful boy, Grace said softly. I'm so sorry I had to go away. Daddy made a mistake, Ethan said, looking at Marcus with newfound confidence. But he knows better now. Marcus watched this reunion with a mixture of joy and humility. His son was speaking freely, expressing emotions, and demonstrating a level of social awareness that surpassed anything Marcus had seen before. Ethan, Marcus said, I'm sorry I made Mama Grace go away. I didn't understand how much she meant to you. Ethan looked at his father with serious eyes. Daddy, Mama Grace doesn't try to make me be normal. She thinks I'm perfect just the way I am. That's why I can talk to her. Marcus felt the profound truth in his son's words. All the therapy sessions had focused on making Ethan conform to neurotypical expectations. Grace had simply celebrated who Ethan already was. Over the following months, Marcus restructured Ethan's care around Grace's intuitive approach, rather than rigid therapeutic protocols. Instead of fighting Ethan's interests and behaviors, they built on them. Ethan's fascination with patterns became art projects. His need for routine became opportunities for predictable, comforting rituals. His sensitivity to sound and light became advantages for noticing beautiful details others missed. Most importantly, Ethan's relationship with Grace became the foundation for all his other interactions. With Grace as his secure base, Ethan began connecting with his tutors, therapists, and even Marcus in ways that had seemed impossible before. Daddy, Ethan said one evening as Grace read him a bedtime story, I want to tell you something important. Marcus sat down on Ethan's bed, still amazed by his son's growing verbal communication. What is it, buddy? I was never really gone. I was just hiding inside myself because I was too sad and scared to come out. Mama Grace made it safe for me to come back. Marcus felt his heart break and heal at the same time. Ethan, I wish I had understood that sooner. It's okay, Daddy. Sometimes grown-ups need time to learn things too. Grace smiled at Marcus over Ethan's head. Ethan is very wise. He's teaching us all about patience and acceptance. As the three of them sat together in the warm glow of Ethan's bedroom lamp, Marcus realized that the most important lesson his son had taught him wasn't about autism or communication or healing. It was about love, how it comes in unexpected forms from unexpected people and transforms us in ways we never thought possible. The bubbles that had started it all were just soap and air, but they had carried within them the power to break through barriers, connect hearts, and create a family that transcended traditional definitions. Sometimes the most profound miracles come in the simplest packages, and sometimes a housekeeper blowing bubbles can save not just a child, but an entire family's understanding of what it means to truly love and accept each other. The little boy who had been lost in silence for 4 years was finally home, and he had brought with him two adults who learned that healing happens not when we try to change someone, but when we love them exactly as they are. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that different doesn't mean broken. It means beautifully unique.